Hey, what's up guys? This video is the second part of section 7.2, which is division properties of exponents. And I already talked about property number 4, number 5 on my first video, so you guys want to go back and watch those, you can. But today I am going to talk about properties number 6 and number 7. So let's go ahead and kind of review what those are when you guys have properties of exponents. So property number 6 is called the zero property, which means when you have a base to the 0 power, that's going to equal 1. Now, this base cannot equal to 0 because you cannot have 0 to the 0 power, but anything else, even a variable or a fraction or a number to the 0 power is going to equal 1. So it says here any number other than 0 raised to the 0 power is always 1. Property number 7 is the negative exponent, and that's when you guys have a negative exponent with the base. So on my first video, I kind of talked about that this is kind of like a reciprocal, because if you guys actually put a 1 under the a and you guys look at the result, it kind of is like the reciprocal, but it's not really the reciprocal. What you do is the variable or number with negative exponent, you have to take it to the bottom of the fraction or the other side of the fraction, and you guys make the exponent positive. I'm saying the other side of the fraction because sometimes on the bottom of the fraction, the denominator will have a number or a variable with a negative exponent, so you have to take it to the top. So you take it to the other side of the exponent. So today I'm going to do some examples for those two properties, plus I am going to mix a few properties in one problem where you guys have to simplify an expression with negative exponents, with power of zeros, and everything else that we have learned. So let's go ahead and look at the examples. So this is the zero property where you guys have a number or variable to the 0 power. So the first one, notice I have a 12 to the 0 power. Any number to the 0 power is going to be 1. So that is the answer, 1. The next one is a variable to the 0 power. Same thing, anything other than 0 to the 0 power is going to equal to 1. So this is 1 right here. Now, the next one, you guys do have a parenthesis. So this fraction inside of the parenthesis, b to the 7th power, all of this, you are going to raise that to the 0 power. Now, we learned about a property that you guys can actually multiply the exponent outside times the exponent inside. But if you guys think about that, let me just zoom in here to show you. If you multiply the exponents inside, the b has an exponent of 1, the 7 has an exponent of 1, and if you guys multiply 0 times 1, 0 times 1, that's going to be 0. So you guys will have 0, b to the 0 power on the top, and 7 to the 0 power on the bottom. Now, b to the 0 power, we just learned it equals to 1. Anything to the 0 power is 1. So this simplifies to 1, and the bottom 7 to the 0 power is also 1. Any number to the 0 power is 1. And 1 divided by 1 is 1. Now, you guys don't have to do that work, because if you understand that everything inside of the parentheses is raised to the 0 power, everything to the 0 power, everything's going to have a 0 power, then it equals to 1. So you just jump to the answer 1. So look at this one here. You guys have a crazy fraction inside. You have variables, exponents. We have a -2. We have a 49. But everything is inside of the parentheses, and all of this is raised to the 0 power. So you guys can actually distribute. You can multiply the exponents, but if you multiply 0 times the exponents, any exponent is going to equal 0. 0 times any number is 0. So all of these exponents inside of the parentheses with in the fraction is going to be 0. So everything will have a 0 power, and anything to the 0 power is 1. So the answer is 1 here. Now, sometimes we have to be careful when we look at the exponent of 0, because even though you guys see an exponent of 0, it doesn't mean that everything has an exponent of 0. So for example, this one, we have 7x to the 0 power. First of all, 7x is not inside of the parentheses. So these two here are multiplying each other because there's nothing in between, and since they're not inside the parentheses, you can separate the 7 and the x by multiplication. So I'm going to write down 7 times x, and the x has an exponent of 0. Now 7, you guys have an invisible 1 exponent here. So when you actually simplify this, 7 to the first power, so that's going to be 7. So I'm going to put 7 here, and I'm going to multiply by x to the 0 power. Now this here, anything variable other than 0, any variable or number to the 0 power is 1. So when you guys simplify, x to the 0 power is 1, and you multiply 7 times 1, the actual answer is 7. So careful when you guys do not have parentheses. You have to understand which variable or number has an exponent of 0, so you guys understand that's the only thing that becomes a 1. Same thing with the next one. We have 3 times x to the 0 power times, there's nothing in between, y squared. So if you guys want to separate, 3 times x to the 0 power times y to the second power. Now you guys can start simplifying. So the 3 has an exponent of 1. This is an invisible 1. So 3 to the first power is 3. This right here, x to the 0 power, that's the one that turns into 1. So I'm going to multiply by 1. And the next one, you guys have a y squared. Now you multiply everything together. 3 times 1 right here, that's 3, times y squared is just 3y squared. So my answer is right here. When you guys have fractions, same thing, and notice that we don't have parentheses, so we cannot say that all of this here, 3y over 2, is to the 0 power. Let me show you guys like the previous one, or not the previous, but the one I show you guys over here. Notice this one, it has a fraction inside the parentheses, and all of this is raised to the 0 power. Well, the one we're doing right now doesn't have parentheses, so we have to be careful when you guys simplify. So let's understand the top first. On the top, you guys have the 3 times the y to the 0 power. And the bottom, you just have a 2. So when you multiply the top, the 3 has an invisible 1 exponent. The y has a 0 power or exponent of 0. So that's going to turn into 1. And let me just put a big 1 here so you guys know it turns into 1. Now you guys can multiply. 3 to the first power is 3, and 3 times 1, that's just going to be 3. And the bottom, you guys have a 2. Now you check if you can reduce the fraction. 3 over 2, you guys cannot reduce. So that is the answer, 3 over 2. Now this one here is a little bit tricky because you guys have a negative 5 to the 0 power. So here, notice once again, you guys do not have parentheses. So when that happens, you do not have parentheses, you actually have to separate the negative and the 5. So there's a property where you guys can do that. You guys can separate the negative from the 5. So I'm going to put negative, and I'm going to put a 1 there because negative by itself, it looks kind of weird. So I'm going to put negative 1 times 5 to the 0 power. So when you guys separate that, well, the negative 1 stays the same, negative 1 here, and you're going to multiply by 5 to the 0 power, and that's going to be 1. And when you multiply negative 1 times 1, it's just negative 1. Another way you guys can look at it, let me just rewrite this again. You guys have the negative 5 to the 0 power. So I'm going to show you guys another way you guys can look at to simplify this expression here. Since you guys do not have parentheses, you can also say you keep the sign. So I'm going to keep the minus right here. You just bring down the negative. Then you guys are going to simplify the 5 to the 0 power. That's just another way you guys can look at it. 5 to the 0 power is 1. So when you guys put everything together here, your answer is negative 1, which is the same answer we got on this side. So there's a couple ways you can do this. Just make sure you understand if you guys have a negative with a number and exponent of 0, and be careful with the parentheses because that can change your answer. If you don't have parentheses, you guys are going to keep the negative in front of the number with the power of 0. So now we're going to move on to property number 7 with the negative exponents. So we are going to simplify, and I'm going to start with 2 to the negative 4th power. Since we do have a negative exponent here, first of all, we have to get rid of the negative exponent. Now, the definition tells you guys you have to move that to the bottom of the fraction. So I kind of mentioned that it's like a reciprocal, not really the reciprocal, but if you think about it, if you put a 1 under the 2 and you flip the fraction, well, this is going to become 1 on the top and 2 on the bottom, and the exponent becomes positive. So you guys have 1 over 2 to the 4th power. Now you guys really need to simplify the bottom. The bottom 2 to the 4th power, you multiply 2 by itself 4 times, so it looks like this, 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. So when you simplify, 1 is on the top, and 2 to the 4th power, 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 16. So my answer is 1 over 16. If you guys have a variable, m to the negative 7th power, so same idea, you can make this a fraction. You guys turn that over. It's kind of like the reciprocal. So this is going to equal, I'm going to put it on the bottom here so I can have more space. You take the 1 on the top, you take the m to the bottom, and the exponent becomes positive. So you have m to the 7th power. Now m to the 7th power, you guys don't have to expand. You don't have to write it m times m times m times n 7 times. So you can keep it as it is, 1 over m to the 7th power. You cannot simplify it anymore. Now this one, notice that the variable with the negative exponent is on the bottom of the fraction. So when you guys have a negative exponent on the bottom, you're going to move it to the opposite side of the fraction. Same thing we did over here. If you guys notice at the previous example, if you make a fraction here, we took this with the negative exponent to the bottom of the fraction and we made it positive, the exponent. Well, this one, you're going to do the same thing, but you're going to take it to the opposite side. So it's going to move to the top. So let me put a bubble around the g to the negative 2 power, and you guys move it to the top. The top of the fraction, this 2 does not have a negative exponent, so you keep that number on top of the fraction. So this is going to equal, let me put my fraction line here. You guys have a 2, you keep that 2 on the top, and you take the g, and the exponent becomes positive. So I'm going to put a positive 2 on the top. Now when you guys take this to the top, the only thing that stays on the bottom is an invisible 1. There's nothing else. So you guys have an invisible 1 here. You don't need that invisible 1 under the fraction. So your answer is 2g to the 2nd power. You are multiplying these two expressions here, terms, you can or expressions, 2, there's nothing in between, times g squared. So, and you don't need the 1 on the bottom. My answer is 2g squared. If the variable with the negative exponent is on the top, well, you guys will take that expression to the opposite side of the fraction, the other side. So this is going to go to the bottom of the fraction. So let me put a bubble right here, and we take it to the bottom. Now this one, you guys have to be careful, because when you take it on the bottom, I have the 25 on the bottom. Notice this one doesn't have a negative exponent. So I'm going to keep the 25 on the bottom, but I'm going to take the k on the bottom, and I am multiplying 25 times k to the 6th power. So the 6 becomes positive. Now, when you move this to the bottom of the fraction, nothing else is on the top except a 1. So you guys need that 1 on top of the fraction. Every fraction, if you have a 1 on the top, you have to keep it. If it's on the bottom of the fraction, that's when you don't need the 1 on the bottom. But if it's on the top, you need the 1 on the top. And the bottom, you multiply it 25 times k to the 6. It's just 25 k to the 6th power. So remember that the negative exponents, if it's in the fraction, you move it to the other side of the fraction and you make the exponent positive. Now let's go ahead and put some properties together so we can simplify a fraction. So we might have to use 2 different properties, maybe 3 different properties, but you have to simplify until you guys cannot do anything else. So let's look at the first one. Here we have an x y to the 0 power over x y to the negative 5th power. So if you notice, first of all, I can turn this one, y to the 0 power, to 1. So I'm going to put a big 1 right here. Then, if you guys look at the x's, x on the top, x on the bottom, they have the same exponent. It has an exponent of 1, exponent of 1. So let me put the exponent of 1 here, exponent of 1 here. and x to the first power over x to the first power, well, you have to subtract the exponents. That's when you guys use the properties of my first video. You guys will have to subtract 1 minus 1, which is 0, and anything to the 0 power turns into 1. So we can say that the top x and the bottom x simplifies to 1. We don't need that 1, okay, because we already have a 1 on the top. There's a 1 here. The bottom, so let me just rewrite this before I confuse you. On the top we have a 1. The x is gone because that simplifies to 1. But on the bottom we still have a y to the negative 5th. Now this y to the negative 5th, since it has a negative exponent, we have to take it to the top of the fraction to make the exponent positive. Your answer, when you simplify it, you cannot have a negative exponent. So I have a 1 on the top, so I have the 1, and I'm going to multiply by y to the positive 5th power. And since I move this to the top, and I don't have anything else except the 1 there, the 1 on the bottom, I don't need it of the fraction. And if you multiply 1 times y to the 5th, that's just y to the 5th. So my answer is this. We don't need that 1 on the bottom, so you don't write it. And when you multiply, once again, 1 times 1 y to the 5th is just y to the 5th. Now for this one, we have a lot of things happening. Notice that we have negative exponents. Notice that we have coefficients. We have a 2 on the top. We have a 10 on the bottom. And you guys have to get rid of those negative exponents. And we have the same variables, a on the top and the bottom, b, and then we have a c. So first of all, you guys look at the coefficients, the numbers. So I'm going to put the fraction line here. And I'm going to look at the numbers, 2 over 10. That's how you start. You did that in the previous lessons. You guys did that last year. You guys reduced fractions. 2 over 10 is going to be 1 over 5. Now you guys are going to get rid of the negative exponents. I want you guys to move the negative exponents to the opposite side of the fraction. The ones with positive exponents, they stay where they are. So first, I'm going to look at the a's. I'm going to go in alphabetical order. So this a on the bottom, it has a negative 3 exponent, so I'm going to take it to the top right here. And I also have this c on the bottom, and I'm going to take that to the top of the fraction. On the top, I have a b to the negative 4th power and c to the negative 5th power. Since they're negative, I'm going to take those to the bottom of the fraction, and those exponents will become positives. So first, let's look at the a squared. The a squared will stay the same. So I'm going to keep the a squared on the top. Then I'm going to multiply by the one on the bottom, a to the 3rd power. So this a to the negative 3 becomes a to the 3rd power on top of the fraction. On the end, I forgot this one, and the c to the 4th power with the negative goes to the top. So I'm going to multiply by c to the positive 4th power. Now on the bottom, I do have a b to the positive 1 power first. So I'm going to keep that b on the bottom, and I'm going to multiply by b to the 4th power because I move this one to the bottom and it becomes positive 4 times c to the 5th power. So I moved the ones with negative exponents to the other side of the fraction, and the ones on the bottom, you guys move them to the other side of the fraction. Now you guys are going to simplify. So let's put the fraction line. Let me move the fraction a little bit more above. So here's the fraction line. 1 over 5, you guys cannot do anything else with the numbers, so you leave those right there. And let's go ahead and look at the a's. For the a's, notice that we have a squared times a to the 3rd on the top. Now, if you guys pay attention to the a's, they're both on the top of the fraction, the numerator. Since those are side by side and you're multiplying the same bases, you are going to add the exponents. And that's the properties I showed you guys in the first video. When you guys multiply with the same bases, you have to add the exponents. So I keep the base, so there's the a right here, And when I add the exponents, 2 plus 3, that's going to be 5. So my exponent will be 5, a to the 5th power. Then I look at the b's. On the bottom, I have b to the 1st power times b to the 4th power. And I'm going to put a 1 right there so you guys know that it has an invisible 1 exponent. Since the b's are on the bottom of the fraction, the denominator, and they're multiplying the same base, you add the exponents. So I'm going to keep the b on the bottom, and I'm going to add the exponents. 1 plus 4 is 5. Then I look at the c's. Now on the c's, I have a c on the top and a c on the bottom of the fraction. When you have division, you have a fraction, and you have the same base, you subtract the exponents. But again, on the first video, I showed you guys that when you subtract the exponents, you keep the variable where the highest exponent is at. So the highest exponent of the c is 5, it's on the bottom. So I am going to keep the c on the bottom of the fraction. There's the c right here. And I'm going to subtract the exponents, regular subtraction, biggest minus the smallest number. 5 minus 4 is 1. So you guys have an exponent of 1. Now you guys do not need this 1 in front of the a. That's an invisible 1. And you guys do not need this one here. So my answer is just a to the 5th power over 5b to the 5th power c. All of this expression, you guys cannot simplify anymore. Now this one here, you guys have parentheses with exponents outside, and notice that the top has a parenthesis and the bottom has another parenthesis. So what that means is on the top, I'm going to distribute this exponent to the exponents inside. I'm going to multiply, and the bottom, I'm going to multiply this exponent times the ones inside of the parentheses. So first, I'm going to label what exponent the 5 have. 5 has an exponent of 1, invisible 1. P has an exponent of 1 because that's multiplying times r. So r is the one that has a negative 2. On the bottom, 3 has an exponent of 1, and r has an exponent of 1, invisible 1. So I'm going to multiply the exponents on the top. So I have the negative 2 times 1, negative 2 times 1 over here, and negative 2 times negative 2. So let's do that right now. I keep the base, 5. I multiply negative 2 times 1, that's negative 2. I keep the base p, negative 2 times 1 again is negative 2. And the r, negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. On the bottom, I'm going to multiply the 3 times the 1, the negative 1, and the 1 here. So I keep the base of 3, and 1 times 3 is 3. Then I keep the base of p, negative 1 times 3, that's negative 3. And I keep r, 3 times 1 is 3. I have negative exponents. So let's go ahead and get rid of the negative exponents. On the top, I have the 5 and the p with the negative 2 exponent. So I'm going to move those to the other side of the fraction. And on the bottom, I have the p to the negative 3rd power. So I'm going to move that to the top of the fraction. So when I do that, I have on the top, r to the 4th times p to the 3rd. So notice the r to the 4th stays on the top because it has a positive exponent, and then you guys take to the top, these to the top. On the bottom, I took the 5 squared, so this is, and it becomes positive, so 5 squared. This 3 cubed stays on the bottom of the fraction because it has a positive exponent, so right there positive, so you keep it on the bottom. And then you guys have the r cubed on the bottom, and then this one here goes on the bottom as well. Now you guys need to simplify. First of all, you guys simplify the numbers. It's a lot easier to start with the numbers. So let's go ahead and multiply. You are going to multiply 5 squared times 3 cubed. So you really have to know what's 5 squared. And 5 squared becomes 25. And 3 cubed becomes 27. So you guys are really multiplying 25 times 27. And that equals 675. So on the bottom of the fraction, I multiply 675. So I don't want you guys to get confused. This is not a fraction. I just told you guys what 5 squared is 25. And 3 to the 3rd power is 27. 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. And then you guys multiply 675. I want you guys to look at the r's. The r's, there's one on the top, so I'm going to circle that one. R to the fourth, and there's an R on the bottom. So when you guys look at the exponent, the highest exponent is on the top of the fraction. So I'm going to keep the R on the top. So there's the R here. And I subtract the exponents of the R's. 4 minus 3 is 1. So you guys put a 1 right there. Then you guys are going to look at the P's. And we have a P on the top, cube, and a P squared. Where's the highest exponent? On the top. So you guys keep the P on the top, and you subtract the exponents. 3 minus 2 is 1. So you guys have another P to the first power on the top. We don't have anything else. So you don't need those invisible 1 exponents here. So my answer, just to make it look clean, we have PR over 7, 6, 7, 5. And notice that I put the letters alphabetical order. P is before the R. So I just put them in order. And then the bottom is 675. So we got the answer. So let's try one more here. Same thing. You guys have a parenthesis. But notice here we have the whole fraction. Everything is inside one parenthesis. And we have an exponent outside. So what this means, when you guys have only one parenthesis, one big fraction inside the parenthesis, you're going to multiply this exponent times the exponents on the top of the fraction and the bottom of the fraction, because all of this fraction, you guys are going to raise it to the negative third power. So I'm going to multiply negative 3 to the 0 power, and you guys have the negative 3 to the second power, negative 3 to the third. F has an invisible 1 here, so I'm going to multiply negative 3 to the first power. On the bottom, the 2 has an exponent of 1. So I'm going to multiply negative 3 to the first power, to the negative fourth, and the negative 5. So let's go ahead and multiply those right here. So I multiply the exponents, and I still have some negative exponents on the top and negative exponents on the bottom. Keep in mind that I just multiplied the exponents, this negative 3 times the ones inside of the parentheses. So, and you keep the basis of every expression there. Let's go ahead and simplify what we can. First of all, I know what this is, 4 to the 0 power. That's the only one that has a 0 power. So this right here is going to turn into 1. We don't need that 1. 4 to the 0 power is 1. We do have negative exponents. This one here, 2 to the negative third, is going to go to the top. And we also have all of this right here with the negative exponents. We're going to take it to the bottom. These two variables, C and D, has a positive exponent. So those are going to stay where they are. They're on the bottom of the fraction. So I'm going to keep them on the bottom of the fraction. So I'm going to rewrite this. I have my fraction line here. I'm going to take the 2 to the third power on the top. On the bottom, I have a C, 12, and D, 15. I keep those on the bottom. And I'm going to bring the C to the 6 on the bottom, D to the 9th, and F to the third power. So all of this here becomes to the bottom. Now you guys need to simplify what you can. So I'm looking at the top of the fraction. In the top, I do have 2 to the third power, which means 2 times 2 times 2. You multiply the base by itself 3 times. So 2 to the third power is 8. On the bottom, I notice that I have pairs of variables. Notice we have C12 and we have a C to the 6th power. Now keep in mind, guys, on the bottom, you're actually multiplying all of these variables together. So I'm going to put a times in between so you guys know that we are multiplying. Multiply, 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 and multiply. So if you guys are multiplying and you look at the same basis, when you multiply the same basis, you add the exponents. They're on the same side of the fraction. They're both on the bottom. So you add the exponents. If you guys have a C, let's say you guys have a C on the top and a C on the bottom, that's when you subtract the exponents. But here, they're both on the bottom. So I keep the base C, and I'm going to add 12 plus 6. And those are the exponents. So 12 plus 6 is 18. So we have c to the 18 power. Then I'm going to look at the d's. We have d to the 15 power times d to the 9th power. So I'm going to keep my d right here. Remember, we are multiplying c to the 18 times. There's nothing in between here. So by default, we are multiplying. And 15 plus 9, I add the exponents. 15 plus 9, that's going to be 24. And the last variable, f, is the only f we have. We don't have another f on the bottom. We don't have another f on the top. So that f stays the same on the bottom with an exponent of 3. So just a review for you guys. Remember that when you have the variables on the same side of the fraction, like the c's, you're multiplying, you add the exponents. Same thing with the d's. If you guys have the same base and you're multiplying, you add the exponents. 15 plus 9, that's going to be 24. If you guys have the variables on each side of the fraction, one on the top, one on the bottom, so let's say you guys have a m on the top of the fraction, m on the bottom of the fraction, then you guys have to subtract the exponents. That's one of the properties for exponents. All right, guys, so this concludes my video, and it is the second video for this section. So if you guys like my videos, you can hit that like button. You can also always subscribe to my channel so you guys are up to date to my lessons. And make sure you guys practice, and I'll see you guys later.